Hi, I'm Candy Purdom for Authors Revealed. We're very happy to have our special guest, Emily Belden, with her new book, Hot Mess. So nice to have you here. We're very happy to have you here at Anderson's Bookshop and to talk about your new book, Hot Mess.
Yes, I'm thrilled.
So we are thrilled because it's your debut novel.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk to you first a little bit about your writing process and how this came to be, and how it was that this book saw the light of day.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
I know debut means it's out now, huh?
Yes,
That's
it
crazy.
is. It really is.
So I won't give too much away, but there's the main character in the book, and there's some, similarities. And I too was once in my younger 20s and dated a chef that, was kind of a bad boy. I did meet somebody, a friend of mine, that inspired another character in the book, and who knew the chef. And I asked her one day, gosh, whatever happened to him, and what if I, funded a restaurant of his, or what if I did this thing? And she goes, I'll tell you exactly what would have happened. He would have disappeared, you would have been out of the money, and me and you would have been sleeping at that restaurant 80 hours a week trying to make your money back. That's what would happen. And I just was like, that's it. I was like, it was just a hypothetical, casual what if question. And all of a sudden I thought there's so much creative room to answer that in a really compelling way. So that's kind of how the idea came.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So how did you get Graydon House, the publishing company, how did you get connected with them? Did you have an agent, or did you try on your own?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of our viewers have ideas of what they'd like to publish someday in their dream American novel.
Yeah. So my first book is actually a memoir called 86, and it's kind of like a cheeky coming of age, dating in Chicago kind of a thing. It did get kind of a lot of success and notoriety in Chicago where it's set, and there was an article written about that my now agent saw. And she basically contacted me and said, whenever you have your next project, please contact me. So Hot Mess was something that kind of flew off my fingertips, and I eventually contacted her. I had no query letter, nothing, just said, you told me to reach out to you when I had something, and I have something now. So I sent it to her, and about 2.5 weeks later, she called me and took me to lunch and had the agent representation contract on the table. From there, I signed with her. It was just a great fit, and we worked on some edits together for about 6 months or so, just to kind of polish it in a way that she knew she could make great connections. So from there, she shopped it out, and it eventually wound up in the hands of an editor at HarperCollins who was originally from Arlington Heights, who was a big foodie herself, so she could really grab on to the content of the book. And she brought that to an acquisitions meeting the following Monday, and that was actually the first book that they acquired for the Graydon House imprint. And Graydon House is supposed to be sort of edgier women's fiction. So this was sort of their first acquisition, and it launched the label.
Do you know how rare that is?
Yes.
I mean, the way you did this.
I know, because the truth of the matter is that for my first book, which is called 86, that came out about 3 years ago, I did the whole process that probably a lot of aspiring authors are very familiar with. You have your manuscript, you need to look up look up agents and look up agencies and try to find your match and query them to a T, and there's a lot of rejection and there's a lot of self-doubt, and all of that was part of the first round. But things kind of just sort of fell into a very serendipitous place with how I wound up with Danielle from Brown and Miller and where I am now. So it's not very typical. Yes, you're correct.
You're very lucky.
Yes.
And the title Hot Mess is great. And so were there other titles that were suggested, or how was that?
Yeah. So this book actually started off called Randolph Street. And that is the street in Chicago, basically where the book takes place, where the restaurant in the book is. In Chicago, that is the mecca of fine dining restaurants. It is where you want to be if you're opening anything, from a burger place to aspiring Michelin-starred restaurant. It's all on Randolph Street. So I originally called it that, and once it was acquired, they wanted something a little bit more commercial. They were afraid that people might not, if you weren't local, you might not really grab onto that. So it then went to the title Burned, which was good. It was it matched, you know, some of the themes of the book, but ultimately it was a little bit dark, because it's not a terrible story. It's got a great happy ending and everything like that. So we went with Burn for a long time, and we made cover art that went along with that, but it just wasn't it. You know, when you see a cover, when you see cover art options and you know it's the one, you just know it. You know, you see it and you love it. And nothing was really gelling, and I couldn't even really express kind of what I thought needed to change with Burn. So eventually they just said, maybe it's one of those situations where we need to change the title. And as soon as we changed it to Hot Mess, it was like, boom, the first iteration back of artwork was basically it. The only thing that we ended up adding was the pots and pans that are hanging in the background to add a little bit more of that kind of kitchen or restaurant flair. But this was by and large like it.
Well, and I was going to ask you about the cover too, and obviously you like the cover, but what I liked about it was that she's covering her eyes as if I cannot watch anymore of what's happening, or is she ashamed, or is she frustrated, is she angry? What did you think of the design when you saw that cover?
At first I thought, oh, she looks so depressed, and it's not a very depressing book, but then I thought, who knows if she's laughing, crying, whatever. And what I like about it is that I always say that this is, at the end of the day, this book is the story of a girl. You know, you don't need to be a foodie to follow along. You don't need to know anything about restaurants at all, because she didn't know anything. So, you know, this is the story of a girl. And I like that you can still look at this and you can still visualize whoever you really want. I mean, I do mention some character traits, like she has darker hair and things like that, but you can pretty much picture whoever. If it looks like you can picture yourself, whatever. And I kind of like that about that.
That was good. So the moment you found out, yes, they accepted it, they were going to publish this, what do you remember from that moment?
So Danielle, my agent, she would call me pretty much every week to give me an update about, you know, where is it out, who's responded, what's the feedback, et cetera, et cetera. And we had a few weeks of those kinds of calls, and, you know, they were fine, they were pleasant, there was some feedback, different editors wanted sort of different things out of it. Nothing yet was that slam dunk. There was, you know, other follow-up meetings and things like that set, but I remember when she called me for like our regular check-in and I answered, there was something different in her voice that I was like, uh-oh, like this is good, this is really good. And she had just come back from some sort of conference or event that I believe was in Las Vegas that my editor at HarperCollins was at. And casually over cocktails, Danielle had mentioned to her that she had this great book that was super juicy and so readable, and that's sort of the moment that happened. And that's kind of it. Like, you know, you do all this work sort of pitching formal emails and things, but it was just like a cocktail conversation that the two of them had. And she's like, you're going to love it. And she loved it. And that was that. So I remember just something being different in Danielle's voice. Like, ooh, this is really good. This is really good.
So you knew right away.
And I just thought, I mean, for me, nothing ever was official until my name is signed in ink on a contract, which takes a long time. But all things considered, like, I think I knew at that moment, I think this is it, you know? So it was just unbelievable. Yeah.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
And how about when you actually held it in your hand, the finished copy?
Sure. That one was, I've held the first versions that came back were obviously the advanced review copies, which were the uncorrected proofs, and they didn't have the French flaps or the nice rough edges, but it was close, you know, so I was like, wow, you know, this is it. But the day that the box of books that actually come from the editor arrived, they actually arrived at my parents' house, and I opened it and there was, you know, 40 copies of the books, and the final thing, I just held it and I thought to myself, like, you know, this is 3 years in the making. This was a very long process. It was not long to sell it and to acquire it. It was just kind of long after that. And to think, I'm really glad I did not quit this dream at all, because like here I am physically holding the book right now, and the only thing that could really trump that moment is seeing it on the shelf in a bookstore. But I remember,
or in the window.
Exactly.
Today we saw you, I walked by and you were posing with your poster.
I know. And some random person's like, congratulations. I mean, it's very surreal. It feels like it's your birthday and you're special for the day or something. But yes, definitely holding that copy. This is it. This is the thing that's going to be on shelves that people will have in, you know, on their bookshelves. that there's nothing quite like that.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
Great. So how about your younger dreams of being a writer when you were growing up in Elmhurst?
Yeah.
What were your earliest remembrances
Yeah,
of writing?
I think, so I always kind of joke, but writing is really the only thing I'm good at. Like I'm not a good cook, I don't have any athletic ability, but writing is something that I've always it's been very natural for me. I remember being a kid and writing very thorough, like, tooth fairy letters. Like, I think that I should have $5 for this tooth because it was my front tooth, and you know what I mean?
Right.
I remember my dad was car shopping when I was younger, and he was deciding between an Oldsmobile and like a Toyota Camry, and I just did not want my dad to have an Oldsmobile. That was not on brand for him, and so I wrote him a persuasive essay about why he should, go for the Toyota Camry. And it was always something with me: letters to Santa, tooth fairy, persuasive essays.
Did he buy the Toyota?
He did.
Oh, of course he did.
Probably from my letter.
I'm sure.
So it started off with as things like that. I used to write stories all the time, like creative stories that were just, humorous, always humorous. And eventually I knew that I thought that I wanted to be like a journalist, like an actual news reporter. And so I kind of went down that path. I did the York High newspaper at my high school. I was, for a brief moment, a scoop trooper for the Chicago Tribune, which was a section in their kid news way back in the day. Yeah. Yes. So, that was something, like, I thought, I'm going to be a reporter. When I went to college, part of becoming a journalist or a journalism major is you had to take some advertising classes. And in my advertising classes, I was writing creative copy, creative headlines, and creative and I thought, I think there's something to this. I like being witty. I like, snarky one-liners. But I also, on the journalism side, I like longer formats. So writing books for me kind of blended those things where I could be creative, but I could write long form. So ultimately, I kind of wound up where I am now, taking the passions that I'm good at and putting them into novels.
Wonderful. And so what's your advice to writers, like writers who are watching this today? What's your advice?
Be very, very patient, because this was a very long process. Like I said, even though my acquisition and things like that were quicker and even not very typical, I was the first book that Graydon House acquired. They had to acquire like 6 or 7 more titles before they could really launch themselves. That took a really long time. Once we were finally in production, there was edits that went on for a year. There was production and cover art, and deciding when this book in the whole series of Graydon House should be released. Even though it was the first one acquired, it wasn't the first one released. So the whole thing, you kind of just hearing that it takes 3 years, even after just getting signed, it's like, oh my God, do I really need to wait that long? And it's kind of like, yes, do not give up. It takes a long time, but I will say that the actual pub date snuck up on me. It was like, it's tomorrow, but it is a longer process, so be patient. And that there is a lot of rejection. Like we mentioned, like mine was a little atypical, but before things started just kind of fell into place, there were times where I was like, maybe I'm not that great of a writer, maybe my book's not that good or whatever, but I always thought, do I think in the whole world of people that are agents or publishers or whomever, that one other person might like this, that one other person might think this is good? And I was like, yes, I believe there's one other person. And I just kind of told myself to keep going until I found that person. And eventually it happened.
So you have to be persistent.
Be persistent and just, it's very easy to have self-doubt. You could think, oh, this is so good, I'm ready to go, my query letter is perfect, and all of a sudden you get some lukewarm reactions or even just flat-out rejections that people are like, this isn't my style. That's part of the lesson learned. So it's just not getting wrapped up too much around the axle with that, and just move. Like, do you believe there's one other person? It's just a simple question, and it's like, yes, one person, the entire industry. Yes, I do. Keep going. If you can answer yes, then keep moving.
That's great. So now you're on book tour. So, actually being a writer is a very solo career. You're sitting at your keyboard and you're writing, and now you're facing face to face. You're meeting people. So how has that been? Have you done anything yet, or is this your first?
So
event?
This is. I've done a lot of live lit shows and storytelling. So I've been able to sort of build my base there, which has been exciting and really fun. This is my first signing since the book has come out. I did some events with the advance review copies and people who were able to get kind of a sneak peek. That was really great. But now I'm starting to see people actually start to cancel their plans and read the book and text me about it and stuff, and that's super exciting.
That's good.
Readers are such loyal people, and as a writer, I don't get to read that much. So I'm really, like, I love to connect with the people who are falling in love with the story and the characters, and you know, it's a crazy world, because right now it's like there's these events that you go to in person that you see people, but there's like a whole other side of a book tour which is completely digital, like these things that are happening on social media, people who I'll probably never even meet, but they've already read the book and they had advanced reviews, and they have contacted me to send me like fan art and mood boards and a playlist that they listened to that was inspired by the book, and that kind of stuff is just so touching and creative to me. People are like, oh my gosh, I love Allie and I love Angela and I love Jared, and I'm like, I love them too, you know. So it's fun for me. It's like I've kept a secret for 3 years, and now it's finally out, and I can have dialogue with people about the characters and the situations, and we can kind of geek out together, and that's really fun for me. That's probably the best part of this.
Well, I was going to ask you about the most surprising thing. Is it all this fanfare that you're getting from your
I think so.
readers?
I think, well, you know, there's some touchy themes in here. Addiction is obviously one of them, and it's, like I said, it's touchy in that everyone who thinks that they know about this or have had it in their lives is going to have an opinion about it. And to write about it in a way that sort of does that thing justice it's difficult to do. And one of the surprising things, I think, is that many people have come to me about that specific angle and said, you nailed it. You nailed it, and I could relate, and that to me feels very good, because it's a touchy subject, and I don't want to make light of it. I don't want to get it wrong, and so for someone to say that specific angle was spot on feels good.
That's great. And part of it is that, I mean, you talk about these young adults now who are launching their lives in Chicago. And did you get a chance to do that as a young?
Been there, done
after
that.
college?
Yeah, been there, done that.
So that's why it's so realistic.
It's so realistic, exactly. I mean, I see a lot of myself in Allie, my main character. My mom saw a lot of myself in Allie. I remember her telling me that I said, how are you liking it? You know, she read it advanced, obviously, and she's like, I had to put it down. I was getting so stressed, and she's like, you're making me stressed. I'm like, it's not me. You know, you have to separate that. Like, you have to read it like it's someone else wrote it, and it's just, you know, she was having a lot of trouble separating. It's just really funny. But yeah, I do see a lot of myself in her. She's extremely passionate and driven, and she wants to see the best in everybody, and she is so focused on that she sometimes has like tunnel vision.
And she's willing to overlook things.
She's willing to overlook it. Or I think another thing about her is that she's so together, like she has a job, she's adulting, she's good. If someone is not necessarily there, she can solve that, you know. And I think that that's sort of me too. Like I see that in myself, that I can fix that. I'll just take that on. So that's a quality in her that I think I reflected quite a bit in myself.
And how about the homework you had to do to get this right about, well, you've already talked about the addiction angle, but how about also the foodie angle and the restaurant angle? Did you have to learn all the acronyms and the terms and the jargon?
I love the restaurant industry, and you know, I don't do it as much as I would like to anymore, but I visited a lot of these places and ate at these kinds of places myself. Some of them are fictitious, made up restaurants, but the concept of them, I pictured very clear of restaurants that I've been to. You know, I pictured the expo line, and I pictured the interior, the interior of the restaurant that's in this book in my head exists, you know. So I'm a fan of myself of that kind of thing, because it's something I cannot do. I still love my greasy cheeseburgers and my Jimmy John's, but I do appreciate something where it's multi-course, or it's just very creative and it's an experience. And like I said, it's not a talent that I have, and so, you know, I want to devour that the way I want someone who's not a writer to devour my book, you know. So that's one of the things that I really like to do, and so that was easy for me to incorporate into the book.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
Too. And so, I mean, it's set in Chicago, and the fine dining scene here in Chicago, which is true and very exciting. And so, have you heard from any foodie people? Has anybody in the restaurant industry commented on anything?
So a couple of things. First, we did a kind of an event just a couple weeks before the launch, and we did that at a restaurant on Randolph Street in Chicago. And I was part of a panel of other chefs and and people in the restaurant industry, and the audience there was, you know, food bloggers and foodies, and so I was completely surrounded by the industry and people who are fans of it or work in it, and it was definitely the sweet spot for this book. That is the audience that could not stop Q&A. I mean, we had to cut it. It was just great questions, so much excitement. There was only 30 books at that. There was 100 people, and everyone was left, you know, hungry for more. They wanted this book. So that was really exciting. And I've had a couple of chefs reach out to me on social media, no one that I know personally, but just saying that they're really looking forward to this, that they know the darker side of the industry, or they you know, have addiction or something, like they could grab onto at least one piece of this. I always like to say, like, it is a foodie book. So if you're in the industry, yes, you will get it. You will follow along. You may have fun kind of pointing out places that you think it might be, or people that I might be talking about. You know, that's fun for somebody that's really in it. But even if you're not, and you've never eaten a multi-course meal or anything like that, you will follow along just fine, you know, because our main character starts off just the same way.
Right. So would you rather publish a book or start a restaurant? Because in this book, there's a character who's just, it's thrown into the fire of this. And
I think that I will stick with publishing.
Okay.
I mean, there was a time, I love the industry so much, though, that there was a time where I thought maybe a small something somewhere down the road, but it's just a whole different world. You know, it's a different circadian rhythm that you're on. It's different hours. It's different problems. It's always you know, and so I just kind of prefer to be somebody that participates with it, but doesn't actually, you know, start it herself.
Well, when I was reading it, I just couldn't help. I was so engaged in it. The writing is so good that I was like, don't do it, Allie, you know, because it was so easy to get into that. So how did you get this talent that you're able to write so realistically?
Everyone, like my editor and my agent, they all say that I'm just this kind of voice-driven author, and I've never really heard that term until they would tell it to me. But essentially, I write the way that I talk. So it's as if, you know, this is a story that I want to tell you, and I brought you to coffee, and I'm sitting down and I'm telling you the story. That's how it feels, and that's why it's kind of a binge-worthy thing. People finish this book in 1 or 2 days, and they, you know, block out their friends and family and just read. And to me, I don't read a lot of books that sound like me, or that are usually I don't even read a lot of women's fiction, because I like to read stuff that I cannot do. So I love thrillers, and I love Gone Girl and that kind of a thing. But so then I don't realize how rare it is then to have a book that's kind of snarky and witty but serious, and, you know, the story just kind of is very devourable. I don't realize how rare that is. So and, you know, when I hear that from like my agent or my editor, I'm like, oh, that is something special. So yeah.
Well, it's kind of a familiar story, the bad boy, the good girl, and the characters are so great. So you have all these ingredients, and I kind of laughed about it because it's a book about a restaurant. So there's a lot of ingredients that make it a great book. So what's your elevator speech, your blurb for this book when you're telling people
that's a hard thing
without telling them too much?
Yeah, you know? I would just say that the book features my 20-something protagonist, Allie Simon, who is thrust into the cutthroat fine dining industry of Chicago, where she has to navigate a complicated, destructive relationship, and also figure out how to dominate a career that she has no clue about. And in the end, it's kind of this book that leaves you feeling empowered. That's a theme that I didn't really lead in, you know, I didn't write the book for some entrepreneur to read it and think, oh, I'm empowered. I also didn't write it from a feminist angle, like, oh, women's empowerment. But these are themes that have risen back from the advanced praise that maybe it's just the cultural landscape that we're in today. It's slightly different than 3 years ago when the book was written. So to hear those themes come up, it's like, okay, yeah, that's good. That's good. We need that now. So that's, you know, one of those sort of surprises that came from the book.
Yeah, there's really a lot of women's empowerment.
Yeah.
Because not only do you have the Allie, but you have Angela, you have her and the girlfriends.
The girlfriends, exactly.
All of them are important.
Yeah,
and
I never thought that. I never really, that to me was not a leading theme, and I think that it is now. And then, like I said, it's probably reflective of our society and things, exactly the movements that are going on, that people are bringing those out more. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's good. So what are you working on now?
I'm working on, I signed a 2-book deal with HarperCollins. So this was the first one, and the second one, it wasn't written, it was just sort of a synopsis of an idea, but the book is called Husband Material. It'll come out sometime in 2019, no pub date yet. And it's still going to be voice driven, just the same kind of conversational tone that I write with now, but it's a much more complex plot. And this book is not, it's fun to write because I obviously love it. This is my passion, but it is, I can tell you that it's not the flying off my fingertips like smooth like butter like writing Hot Mess was. This is a little more crafting and tweaking and plotting and planning, and that other book, I look back on it now how special that was because it's so rare. You know, someone, how long did it take you? I'm like 3 months. And they're like, wait, 3 months? I'm like 3 months. Flew off the fingertips, you know. I couldn't write fast enough to keep it going. So Husband Material's next, and completely different, same voice, but completely different style, plot, everything.
And how do you do your writing? I mean, do you write all night? Do you write during
I usually write during the night.
Do you have an outline?
Yeah. So for this book, for Husband Material, I kind of am following a synopsis because that's sort of what I submitted to get the green light. So I'm sort of following that, but I usually write at night. For me, you know, as an aspiring author, I had my full-time job, and so the only time I could write was at night. So I'm still sort of conditioned that even if you gave me the whole day, blank slate, something doesn't really switch into my brain until nighttime. So for me, I kind of do most of my creative work at night, and my brain just, it makes it hard to sleep because my thing is with my characters is, you know, I'm sure as you read Allie, Angela, Jared, etc., you kind of find it hard to believe that these aren't real people. So for me, when I shut the computer down, it's like I have to accept, you know, they're not off going to the bar now and doing their night, like it's done. So my brain is like constantly thinking about where should this go next and what kind of scenes could I add back in, and it's a problem, a good problem, but
good problem.
Yes.
Well, I guarantee it's going to be, everybody's going to be reading on the train, at the beach. It's a great book.
Yeah, I just came back from Puerto Vallarta, and I was looking at what everyone was reading, and this was just one day before my pub date. So I was like looking, and it was like, you know, Woman in the Window, and I just pay attention to what's very current, and everyone was got their hot copies, and I thought, what if next year if I come back and like everyone on the pool patio is reading Hot Mess? That would just be such a dream come true.
That could be true. I think it could be true because it's really a good book.
Yes, thank you.
You are welcome. Well, Emily, it's been wonderful to have you here, and we are so excited about your book. Good luck with Hot Mess.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
I appreciate it.
And that was Emily Belden with her new book, Hot Mess. Thanks for watching.